Joining me now is Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State and a Fox News contributor. Mr. Secretary, good to see you tonight. Now, your sense on this Macron trip to China, how big of a problem is this for the United States?
Well, Laura, thanks for having me on. I don't know how big a problem it is. Macron's always been someone who resented the United States of America. We saw that when we were dealing with the Iranians. He was always cozying up to the Ayatollah, causing problems for it. I wrote about this in my book. I don't think he represents all of Europe either. I think it's a mistake to say Macron equals Europe. The Poles, the Estonians, the Latvians, the Finns, they all understand the threat that faces us both from Russia and from China, and the fact that those two now have been put together by President Biden's failed policies. But Macron's statements were a true propaganda victory for Xi Jinping, and that's bad for the people of the United States. We need to make sure that we rebut it. President Biden should go out immediately and make clear that we are not the problem. Macron somehow suggested that it was our actions that led to these threats against Taiwan. That's fundamentally not the case, Laura. You know that. The whole world knows that. And the people of France should make sure their leaders get their head on right. Macron has never gotten that. He has always resented the United States of America, and that's most unfortunate that President Biden doesn't understand that the way that we did for 4 years.
Well, clearly, Germany and France are problems. I mean, Trump pointed this out early on with the energy addiction that Germany had with Russia. That caused huge problems, obviously, with the Nord Stream pipeline. And Eastern Europe is Eastern Europe. They always are going to have more sense than Western Europe. But nevertheless, I mean, we are carrying France and Germany and most of Europe with our military. And we get paid back for that. By that trip? I mean, that's insane. I think Trump was right. They're not allies of ours. They are not allies.
What Macron did is absolutely indecent. To reject all that America has done for France and for Europe over the last 60, 70 years is just not reflective of the greatness of our nation. And we understood that. I remember being in those meetings when we were telling them, you can't put Huawei systems in your networks because that's the Chinese Communist Party listening to you, and deaf ears for the longest time until we finally got the United Kingdom and some of the other countries to come around. That is a symptom of what you're identifying as the larger problem. Laura, the other thing that Biden's got wrong and causes him to cozy up to these folks is this climate agenda that you talked about at the very beginning. That is, in fact, President Biden's lead foreign policy issue, this idea of climate change. And in that boat, Germany, France, the Western European powers are completely with him. And Xi Jinping is laughing at us as he builds one coal-fired power plant a week. This is something that this administration just doesn't understand. In the same way that we put America first, these folks are putting America way at the back.
Well, earlier today, the White House spokesman on these matters, John Kirby, had a comment about this, current situation with China and tried to downplay it. Watch.
We are and have been able to maintain lines of communication between our two countries, even throughout all these tensions. And in fact, we're still working to get Secretary Blinken back on a plane over to Beijing, as he was planning to do a couple of months ago. And we're in talks with the PRC about potential visits of Secretary Yellen and Secretary Raimondo at their invitation.
Mr. Secretary, this is, at this point, sheer begging for a meeting by the Biden people to Xi. And you know Xi, you've dealt with him. How do the Chinese see that type of supplicant?
Laura, this is a green light. This is appeasement. This is the absolute opposite of the deterrence model that we had for 4 years, that President Reagan had, right? They fly a spy balloon over the United States for 5 days. Biden administration lies to us and tell us they had jammed it. It turns out it did collect information. And then you beg to send your Secretary of State back over there. This is only creating risk for the United States. This isn't, this is what Macron gets wrong too. This is Xi Jinping's doing. He is on the side of Vladimir Putin in Russia. He is on the side of Chairman Kim in North Korea. He's on the side of the Ayatollah in Iran. And to say, well, we're just going to send Janet Yellen over there and have a really nice sit-down plays right into the hands of Xi Jinping and his Communist Party. We should demand things. We should treat them with reciprocity. We should stop the trade silliness with the Chinese Communist Party. When we get those things right, I'm confident we'll prevail.
That rules-based international order isn't holding up very well, is it, Mr. Secretary? It's great to see you, as always. Thank you.